It was an ordinary afternoon in Lisbon, the kind of day when the city buzzed with life. But the chill in the air reminded everyone that winter was on its way. Cristiano Ronaldo, the iconic football superstar, was not in his usual spotlight, nor was he surrounded by cameras or fans. Today, he was blending into the crowd, dressed casually in a simple jacket and jeans, preparing for something extraordinary, a social experiment that would challenge his own perception of humanity. In a quiet park, he watched as life unfolded around him. Children laughed as they ran and played, couples strolled hand in hand, and joggers moved quickly to keep warm. But on the other side of the park, a different scene was unfolding, a scene that pulled at Ronaldo's heart. A man, looking no older than 50, stood in the middle of a small group of people, shouting. His voice was filled with venom, his words toxic with hatred. Racist slurs and insults poured from his lips as he pointed at anyone who dared to walk too close. His face was twisted with bitterness, his eyes filled with years of unresolved anger. People walked around him, hurriedly crossing to the other side of the street, avoiding his fury. No one dared to stand up to him, no one cared enough to intervene. Cristiano Ronaldo watched this for a moment, something stirring within him. The same people who were avoiding the man, the same people who chose to walk away, were the ones who could make a difference. But today, he was going to be the one to change the course of this encounter. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood up from the bench. With no security, no entourage, and no fanfare, he walked over to the angry man. The crowd, still at a distance, started to whisper. Some recognized the famous footballer, but most were too focused on what was happening. What would Ronaldo do? Ronaldo stood in front of the man, looking down at him, and with calmness in his voice, said, "Hey, how's your day going?" The man stared at him, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped, his voice full of scorn. "I'm just someone trying to understand what makes people like you so angry," Ronaldo replied, sitting down beside him on the cold stone bench. He didn't make the mistake of standing above him. He sat at eye level, offering the man the kind of respect that most people wouldn't give him. The man didn't know how to respond. "What do you know about anger?" he grumbled. "You live in your perfect world, surrounded by fame and money. You wouldn't understand what it's like to lose everything." "I know more than you think," Ronaldo said, his voice steady. "I've been through my own struggles. We all have." He paused for a moment, giving the man space to take in his words. "I'm here to listen, not to judge, but to understand." The man's eyes flickered with surprise. No one ever spoke to him like this. They either avoided him or tried to shut him down. But here was a man who, despite all his wealth and success, had the humility to approach him with compassion. Carlos, as he introduced himself, was a man whose life had been filled with failure and disappointment. He had once been an athlete, just like Ronaldo, full of dreams and ambition. But the pressures of life, broken relationships, financial hardship, and the sense of abandonment had slowly pushed him into bitterness. He began to despise the world around him, and in his pain, he turned to hate. His outbursts, his anger, and his racist views were the shields he had built to protect himself from the world that had discarded him. For the first time in years, Carlos began to speak openly, his voice filled with regret and sorrow. "I wasn't always like this," he admitted. "I had dreams, I had a future, but it all fell apart. And now I can't even see past the anger. It's all I've got left." Ronaldo listened quietly, his eyes fixed on Carlos. He didn't offer empty words of encouragement or promises of easy solutions. He understood that healing didn't happen overnight. Instead, Ronaldo reached into his jacket and pulled out something unexpected: a football. He tossed the ball gently into Carlos's hands. "I want to challenge you," Ronaldo said. "I want you to show me what you've got. I want to see if the fire that burned inside you before is still there. If it is, let's see it in the game." Carlos stared at the ball, unsure. A man who had once lived for the game was now standing there, unsure of what to do with the very thing that had once given him purpose. For a long moment he didn't move. But then, slowly, he stood up. The crowd who had gathered around them watched in silence, unsure of what was about to happen. Carlos took a deep breath, looked at Ronaldo, and kicked the ball back to him. The two began passing it, first slowly, then faster, as their movements synchronized. For the first time in years, Carlos felt the rush of adrenaline, the joy of the game, the thrill of competition, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was more than his anger. The crowd cheered softly, amazed by the transformation happening before their eyes. The man who had been a symbol of bitterness was now laughing, his face lighting up with a joy he hadn't felt in years. Ronaldo smiled, watching the man rediscover his passion. But he wasn't done yet. He wasn't just there to play football. He was there to show Carlos something deeper. "You see," Ronaldo said, "life will try to break you, people will hurt you, but you can always choose to rise above it. Anger doesn't heal you, it only holds you back." Carlos, now breathless from the game, nodded slowly. It was the first time in years that he had felt alive, felt that the world wasn't so dark after all. As the game ended, Ronaldo turned to the cameras that had been hidden around the park. He looked back at Carlos, who was still catching his breath, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This wasn't just about football," Ronaldo said. "It was about showing you that you still have a choice to rise up and make a change." The cameras revealed themselves, and Carlos looked around in shock. "You mean this was a test? A social experiment?" Ronaldo nodded. "It wasn't about testing you, Carlos. It was about showing you that it's never too late to change. Everyone has their battles, but how you choose to face them, that's what matters." The crowd, who had been quietly observing, erupted into applause. Carlos, who had once been a man consumed by hate, was now standing taller, a new light in his eyes. He had been given a second chance, not by the world, but by one act of kindness from a stranger. In the weeks that followed, Carlos' life began to change. He sought therapy, reconnected with his family, and started working with at-risk youth, teaching them about the power of resilience and the importance of understanding others. He started volunteering at local shelters, hoping to give back in the way Ronaldo had given to him. And Ronaldo? His small act of kindness had sparked something much bigger than a simple football game. It had reminded people everywhere that kindness could change a life, that compassion could break down even the most hardened walls. No matter how deep the pain or how heavy the burden, kindness can always break through. We all have the power to choose compassion over hate, to rise above our circumstances, and to help others rise with us. In a world filled with division, the choice to understand and offer a second chance could change everything.